Welcome to P3M with Kailash Upadhyay. Today, we have a very special guest in this podcast episode, Mr. Rajiv Tripathi. Let me introduce Rajiv with all of you. Rajiv has over 19 years of professional experience, and his domain experience widely belongs to oil and gas industrial sector. And Rajiv is PgMP certified, and over last 19 years, Rajiv have handled many strategic programs in his professional journey. And today, we want Rajiv to share his experience of handling so many strategic program initiative in, of course, oil and gas sector that will bring lot of value to our community. Of course, the very objective of P3M with Kailash Upadhyay podcast show is to bring such experienced guests with all of you so that we all can get motivated, we can get inspired, and we can learn some of their best practices and how we can shape our own professional journey through some of these lessons learned and so on. So Rajiv, welcome to my podcast. So P3M with Kailash Upadhyay.
Thank you, Kailash.
So Rajiv, as we know, today we're going to talk about how PGMP shapes today's leader in current complex business environment. Today's business environment is very, very complex. We know that what's happening around us, there are wars everywhere. There are complexity because of technology, environment, legal and regulatory complexities, and especially in your industry, oil and gas, we have seen so much of compliances, regulation that directly influence and impact every program initiative success. So this is very, very important topic that how PGMP will shape this leader and navigate this complex business environment, Rajiv. So my very first question that I want to ask you is, what are the leadership expectations today from program manager who are leading the strategic initiative within any organization, Rajiv?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Kailash, to start with. Okay, and I thank again for inviting me to that. So you see, the biggest challenge for not only for oil and gas or for any organization. So technology is changing shape of every industry today. But along with technology, the main focus for organization is how can we generate business value, because the business remains same. It's just the technology is helping it. So organizations are focusing mainly on not only on technology, but first on business, then technology. So if you are coming with technical expertise and let's say delivery excellence, which was the case in past for anyone's professional growth, now that spectrum has changed. Okay, now organizations want you to relate whatever you are executing and whatever you are building with the actual strategic direction for the organization. And so it's very, very important. And if I relate it to PGMP again, okay, the focusing on outcome, okay, and not just on the execution, because it is not only for the managing task or what we are building, right? Why we are building and what change that outcome is going to shape in business, where are we contributing, that is very, very important nowadays. So that's what PGMP has taught.
Awesome, awesome. So you are saying, Rajiv, the leadership expectations today changing only from the technical delivery to more outcome driven, initiative. And
Yes.
this, if I have to align this, Rajiv, with the PMI talent triangle, okay, for my audience, and you are absolutely right. I have also seen maybe a decade back or maybe 5 to 6 year back, were focused on that way of working angle of the PMI talent triangle. We all know that PMI talent triangle has three angle: way of working, power skills, and business acumen. So Rajiv, earlier everybody were focusing on the way of working. That is purely a technical skills, maybe agile methodology, maybe delivering waterfall way of doing work. So focus more on doing work. But today, you rightly said the leadership expectation is the power skills. Power skills means you able to communicate objectives of that program initiative well with your stakeholder. Today, understanding the emotional aspect of leadership, okay, and also if I tell you the business acumen today, the leadership expect that you able to adapt to business case when the business environment change. Earlier, lot of these responsibilities was done by the leadership team itself. So that's very well said, Rajiv, that leadership expectations have tremendously changed from just a technical delivery to more on business acumen aspect of it, showing the power skills, you know, collaborating with the stakeholder and taking the team along rather than working in silos. So that's a wonderful start of this podcast. Let's move on to second segment of this podcast. Do you think that strategic thinking has now become a differentiator for career growth, Rajiv?
Definitely, means I would fully agree to that, and not just agree means that's everyone in any industry might be experiencing it. That beyond a certain point, especially when you are into senior roles, the strategic thinking plays a crucial differentiator. How you think about the work which is being done, because as we discussed in previous segment, right, the execution is not the only thing which is going to help anyone grow or any business grow. So people who can look at the bigger picture. So companies are looking for professional who understand bigger picture, where the, let's say if we talk about the work in terms of project or program, so where it is fitting into the industry vision and the organization vision. So understanding organization's priorities, now balancing the stakeholders conflict, or let's say the expectations where it is competing from different stakeholders. Okay, and more to that, knowing all the stakeholders, for which you have to understand the different functions within your organization and business. Okay, so and then in current scenarios when you are taking care of the business priorities and technical expertise also, you have to make decisions by yourself, which is expected from the professional. And these decision making is not very easy like a simple technical decision where you can calculate and make decision. So here the decision making under the uncertain condition, and it
I
becomes
agree.
very crucial, and it takes along the risk, right? How much you foresee the risk, what is the risk
Absolutely.
taking capability for the organization, for your project or program, and also the aligning the initiative. So when we say initiative, these initiatives are different projects and program again. Okay, so making sure they are aligned with business goals. Otherwise, if we think simply, right, from a business perspective, if we are working on something which does not align with the business goal of organization or industry, we might not create the value which will help in long run. Okay, then collaboration is very important. Okay,
Agree.
nowadays means in earlier time the collaboration was, let's say it was not considered as project or program managers direct responsibility. Okay, but here collaboration plays a bigger role, because all the organization in today's world, they don't want their functions or different groups to work in silos. Okay, so that's where the collaboration is very important. So that's where strategic thinking, okay, it helps a lot. It helps a lot to contribute professional to business at different level. And when we contribute at different level, that becomes the differentiator, and that's when you grow into more senior roles. Okay, so that is something when I was doing PGMP, and this is a PGMP. We understand from exam perspective, you already do things and then you go for the exam and certify. But when you go through the PGMP or the PMI content, okay, you realize the broader perspective of, because the PGMP content is more industry neutral, right? When you're working in
Yes.
your day to day, you're focusing based on your domain, your business, everything, and every project or program management concept any organization is following, it's very hybrid, which is made to fit for that purpose. But when you go through the content which is published by PMI, you understand that this is something expected in any industry. So it's a generic rule, we can say, right, which all organizations are following. So having the strategic thinking, the relating everything to business and making sure the outcome is meaningful, that is what is expected, and that's what I learned through PGMP. Okay.
This is really wonderful, Rajiv. And I agree with you that strategic thinking is the differentiator today. See, Rajiv, we all know that every organization today having lot of AI automation. Okay. See, what is happening, what I am experiencing, that the leaders just focus on AI automation. They are not focusing on the why part of the automation. If the management tell them, okay, we need to automate certain process or certain business function, so they start working on some tools or some agentic AI kind of solution. But the problem is the strategic thinking which you said today. The leader want every program manager to ask the question not about which process we are automating or which business function we are automating because of the AI influence, but the leader today want what is the business need of automation, or how do we prioritize this particular function or this particular process kind of things and all. So the strategic mindset, you rightly said, helps to take decisions, ask right question, understand the business need for this particular automation, and understand the benefit that will be realized when a solution will be built around this particular business need. So this is a great perspective that you have shared, that strategic thinking or strategic mindset is the differentiator in today's leadership. And you rightly said PGMP will certainly bring that aspect because there's a strategy alignment domain, and that is what is the differentiator today. Let's move on to the third segment, Rajiv, of this particular podcast. And this is really getting very interesting now. My next question, the organization today are shifting from activity focused leadership to outcome focused leadership. So I would like to ask you, what is your experience around this, Rajiv?
Okay, so that's very interesting aspect to look at it. So I'll touch upon a little bit on AI, in because AI is not specific to any industry. Okay? Even in personal life, we have started using AI tool, and we are not at a time where we are surprised by the output. I would say output, right? What AI is generating, because what AI is generating is just the output, not the outcome. Okay, because
Awesome. I agree.
outcome must have value, which will be derived from the thinking on what input we are providing to AI. Now, let's say think of it in a way, when you are interacting with any AI tool. So here I'm not talking about building AI, okay? I'm talking about using an AI tool to do some automation, or let's say draft something, just a report or a professional email. Okay. And if we give a prompt, and so which one would you prefer, right? We will definitely prefer if AI tool interacts with us, ask us question, right? Maybe to gain more clarity and then provide us the result. Okay, rather than just taking the prompt and do whatever it understands in the first go. Okay, and that's what most of the AI tools will do, unless we put our prompt in such a way that ask me questions, specific questions to clarify. Okay, I'll answer those questions, and then you provide the output. I think the second one is going to be more meaningful. Okay, so if AI interacts with us, ask questions to get the clarification for a simple email, then let's say if AI asks you a question, who are you writing this email to? Are you writing to a CEO? Are you writing to your peers? Are you writing to in a for a personal relation? Okay, then it can think that way, and that is what is expected from people as well, right? Instead of, as you mentioned, that when a task is assigned, people will just focus on executing that task rather than understanding the why that task needs to be done. And do I fully understand the context? And that's what the bigger picture is, right? When you know the context, when you know why we are doing it, okay, you can definitely contribute more. You can you can enable that thinking when you know why we are doing something. And then what the output is, it is very, very close to outcome, and it generates the value, which is the purpose
Absolutely.
of any execution. Whenever any output not generating value, because same thing is happening with AI currently, right? You give a prompt, okay, even if your prompt is not clearly understood by AI, but it will make something out of it, and it will give you the results. Okay, but is that result what you are looking for? Maybe you need to then rephrase yourself a few times, right? And if just imagine AI is asking you a question, there are AI tools where you can set the configuration that always ask me some question. And now they have evolved to ask question, they clarify. So this is same thing. That is something we can relate to, that is expected from professionals. That is expected, and not in a way to challenge someone, but to gain more clarity. Even leadership people, right? They,
Yeah,
they they appreciate when people ask questions. Okay? They ask questions not to challenge them, and not in a negative way, but to identify more, maybe bring more clarity on the table, or identify more risk. Okay, what if we do this, that? And sometimes leadership also gain more clarity by answering those questions. Okay, so that is what is appreciated, and that is what is expected. It has become a very generic expectation, in at least in senior leadership roles. So that's how
absolutely.
means I see AI. And coming to automation means anything can be automated in today's world. Okay, obviously it will take the relevant amount of cost involved in that, but what to automate, okay, and how much to automate, and which automation can also cause disasters. Okay, that is what the strategic thinking is, where to implement the technology and where to invest, because automation is one thing, but behind that, it has a cost involved. Okay, so all the
Absolutely.
decision has to be very, very strategic, and very related to business. Okay.
Absolutely. I think so. Every organization is shifting to outcome driven leadership rather than just producing output, Rajiv. And your, you know, thought on that with these AI examples are really nice context building around this particular topic. Let's move on to uh, the next segment of this podcast. I want to share few of my experience before I built a question around it. Actually, of course, this segment focuses on communication and stakeholder engagement context. Actually, Rajiv, what I have seen, as you know, I have helped thousands of PgMP aspirants around the world to get them certified. One thing that I have observed is even recently, couple of days back, one of my student who cleared the PGMP exam and he got need improvement in stakeholder engagement domain. And this is the trend or this is the result that I see quite often. Stakeholder engagement domain, mostly people either getting below target or need improvement. See, the stakeholder domain activities are very same at project level and program level. The activities are identifying stakeholder, analyzing stakeholder, developing a effective stakeholder engagement strategy, and then implementing those strategies and resolving the conflict and continuously communicating the strategy and its impact on the overall program initiative. So what I have seen that this is the domain is very least practiced domain, stakeholder engagement domain. Because I will be wrong, but I will tell you, everybody feel overconfident on stakeholder engagement domain. They feel that there is nothing to learn actually. So my question to you is, in your PGMP journey, okay, how your engagement with senior stakeholder have changed because of this PGMP certification success, Rajiv?
Okay, so first, means stakeholder engagement is not optional. I'm talking about the real programs. Okay, not from the only exam perspective. Obviously, it's not optional in exam as well. So maybe people getting different scores, even if they are getting below target or needs improvement, that may not fully reflect on how they are performing in their organization. But this is something what we are talking about. So when we are talking about the strategic alignment, okay, that comes with stakeholder, okay, managing stakeholders, and not just managing stakeholder, right? The
Yeah, yeah.
aligning aligning stakeholders, because that's a very crucial part of the job as well. Okay. So and it starts with knowing your stakeholder, and I feel most of the projects or program fail at that point. Okay. And as I mean, you have taught, and it's there in PGMP also. There always be the stakeholders who are going to, let's say, impact your program positively and negatively, both. Okay. And both are crucial. Okay. Obviously, it depends on how much influence they carry. Okay? So knowing your stakeholder is very very important. Okay? And if leaders don't have the strategic thinking, and they don't collaborate well with different functions and different stakeholders, we might miss key stakeholders. Okay? Because stakeholders are not always visible. They may not be present in all your meetings or ceremonies. Okay? But they are still influencing. Okay. So and sometimes just one way communication to them, just keeping them updated, it gives very very the, let's say, excellent support to your program. Okay. Because how will you ensure that your program is aligned with business objective? You cannot do that in silos, right? You cannot just think that, okay, my program is very well aligned with the business objective or the organization strategy. How you communicate this to the leadership or the stakeholder, that is also important. Okay. And those stakeholders who are going to, let's say, understand that a certain program is totally aligned with business. Okay. They are the ones who are the most influencing also. People tend to focus on the visible stakeholders only. Okay. So that's what I have learned through PGMP. That stakeholders are there, multiple layers of stakeholder, and sometimes the invisible ones are the most influencing ones, which you may not interact, but somewhere means, yeah, it has to be taken care. Okay, that's why we have different types of, let's say, reporting in any project or program. Okay? And that is for taking the decision. Let's say if there is a very senior leader in the organization who under whom or who is responsible for hundreds of programs. Okay, they may not have a time to review a program in detail level. Okay, they might just look at few numbers alongside maybe 50 other programs and make a decision which can impact your program positively, negatively. So you have to be very careful with what information is reaching there, as we were discussing the decision making with
Yes.
uncertainty, right? So and understand the decision what they need to make, and that one decision can impact have a huge impact on your program. So knowing stakeholders is the very crucial for yeah, managing the stakeholder expectation, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, very good, very good. So Rajiv, see, definitely, even I'll tell you, after my PGMP certification, or even after PMP and PGMP and all of these certification that I have done, there are a lot of principle that I have learned, such as being proactive with stakeholder. Because what I experienced that most of the time, the global program leader, they only engage with the stakeholder only when there's a conflict or only when there's a escalation. They never make an attempt to proactively meet the stakeholder need and expectations. Okay. And let me also tell you, Rajiv, not many people see the PMI framework has taught us to develop stakeholder register, continuously update the register, because the stakeholder needs, expectations, even in their influence at different stages in the program life cycle may change. You know, when I have done, because I also do lot of survey question by asking to my alumni who undergo our certification courses, majority of the people do not have stakeholder register. They don't have stakeholder register. And let's say some people have created stakeholder register as a formality, they never update. They don't even know where to document their communication strategy. So stakeholder register should also have communication strategy with every stakeholder. And they are not updating the stakeholder influence at different stages in the program life cycle. And that is the reason I see, Rajiv, majority of the professional. See, I can't tell about the other people, I don't know, but just as I said, 1,000 people I have made certified. And I can tell you that majority of the people have got below target or need improvement in the stakeholder engagement domain. So, in spite of having such a simple principle that we need to be proactive, we need to be collaborative, we need to build buy-in, and we need to continuously engage. In fact, the tools and techniques are also very easy. Communication is a engagement tools and technique, conflict resolution, negotiation. But most of the time, it happens as a reactive strategy or as a reactive, I'll not even call strategy, as a reactive actions, not a proactive strategy that we need to foster the relationship with the stakeholder. And by fostering the relationship, the the program benefit can be maximized. And I hope you agree, Rajiv, that by proactive engagement and by fostering the stakeholder relationship throughout the program life cycle, we can maximize the program benefit. Do you agree with me on that, Rajiv?
Yes, totally. And the one thing we started with, right, the strategic thinking, okay, and which comes with the strategic alignment. And when we say strategic alignment, it's the alignment with overall what the direction in which the organization is moving and has a vision to move. Okay, and that will come only with stakeholder alignment. Okay. So the knowing the stakeholder, and it's a dynamic thing, as you mentioned, right? Managing the stakeholder
Absolutely.
register. It's not static. Means maybe it was static, yeah, in last decade or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
last to last decade, because when the dynamics of business are changing rapidly, okay, the stakeholder register needs to be updated. Okay? And it's
Absolutely.
not only the stakeholder register, means their influence also change. Okay, let's say the leadership changes in between of a program, okay, and they come with a different strategy. Okay, so you may not may need to, there's no may, sorry, means that's a, it's must that you align with them, you ensure, and we have PGMP questions around that, right? That yeah, you are executing a program, and in between the VP changes and they come with a different let's say a strategy which is not aligned. So all those sort of things which
Absolutely.
we learn through PGMP. So it's not about just the exam, right? Those questions are real scenario that either you have been in those scenarios in past or in some time in later, right? You will be in those scenarios, and you have to think that way. Okay, and the real thing is no one is going to give you four options like exam. Okay,
Absolutely.
you have to think in real world and take the decision where it is going to cause either positive or negative impact.
No, no, absolutely, Rajiv. And I'm glad that the PGMP made you or me or many people to understand our gap, that we should not take this domain activity or the stakeholder principle very lightly.
Yes.
And especially some of the people who are PGMP certified today and who PMI showed them a mirror actually, that they are getting need improvement. Need improvement means very poor score, because there's a grading system called need improvement, below target, target, and above target. So need improvement means you are not scoring more than 15% of the question correctly. And stakeholder is the second highest weightage domain in the PGMP certification exam after program life cycle. 16% of the exam question are from the stakeholder engagement domain. So my humble request to all those program leader or PGMP aspirants who are listening or watching this particular podcast that don't realize it after you become PGMP certified. Realize it now that engagement is the most simplest thing that you can do, where the other domain activity are very complex. The strategic alignment domain activity are very complex. If I also say the benefit management domain activity are very complex, but the engagement domain activities are very simple, then why are we not taking them proactively? And this is what I want to tell them, that such simple activities which create biggest impact on the program benefit realization, as a program leader, practitioner, and maybe a professional or going to be program management professional certified, we need to take this domain very, very seriously. So, this is a wonderful conversation around this topic,
Yeah.
Rajiv.
One more thing, Kailash, I would like to add means when we don't communicate, okay, and it's a generic principle, not only with stakeholder alignment. When we don't communicate, okay, people tend to assume, okay, and that assumption can be anything, okay? And it can create a perception about now if we come back to the program management, they your stakeholders start making assumption, and based on those assumption they can start making perception about the program, okay.
Yes,
And and the worst thing is we don't know what that perception is unless it starts becoming visible, and that will be too late to yeah, to change, because changing perception is a very difficult thing. So
exactly.
if we become, as you mentioned, if we become proactive in communication, okay, over communication is also fine. I feel over communication is okay, means obviously not with someone who is very busy, right, where when people are, so that people don't start ignoring your
Yes,
communication, not to
yes.
that extent, but keeping information available. That's what I meant with over communication, right? Making information available so that whenever people are making assumption, at least they have a place, because sometimes program managers are too much occupied in many activities. Communication, missing a communication is also very real. Okay, we cannot have program managers taking care of all the communication 100%, but making sure there is that we have tools, etc., so that information is available. It can at least not let someone go in the direction where they assume something without having information.
Absolutely, absolutely, Rajiv. See, one more thing that comes to my mind, we all know that there's a communication method called interactive communication, push communication, pull communication.
Yes.
So, interactive communication is not meant for every situation.
Yes.
Many a time, just store your information into your repository or into your program management information system and give access to the various people, and whosoever need the information at a time, they will pull that information. So you absolutely rightly said, sometime over communication can unnecessarily frustrate the stakeholder. Rather, store the information into your information management system, give access to the stakeholder, and whenever they need any information related to program health, then they can definitely get that particular thing. More about this, and from your conversation, one more thing that coming to my mind, Rajiv, you rightly said we sometimes do not identify right stakeholder, and there's a multiple layer of stakeholder. And see, we all know that there are even external stakeholders such as customer, as regulators, regulatory body, such as supplier, we also call them vendors, or even funding bodies, because program can have more than one funding source. In fact, each component of the program can be funded by a different funding source. Okay. So what I'm trying to tell you, Rajiv, is it is very, very important that we understand each layer of this particular stakeholder, because many a time I have experienced that program fail because we are not proactive with this stakeholder, and you rightly said some of the stakeholder we don't pay the due attention, especially supplier. We feel that they do not have too much power in the program. Even if they have legitimate requirement or urgent requirement, we don't give them priority. So the problem is, that's what we learned using the salience model. You should not just focus on only those stakeholders who have only power. Sometimes legitimacy, legitimate requirement, legitimate expectations, And these stakeholders are called discretionary stakeholder. You have to apply your discretion that if stakeholder do not have urgency, if stakeholder do not have power, then also their requirement can be more priority than somebody who has more power. Is that correct to say that, Rajiv?
Yes, yes, that's absolutely correct. Means power and influence does not mean legitimacy, right? When obviously when power and influence has plus legitimacy in any of the scenario, that it becomes the highest priority. But legitimacy should derive because here the core is we are focusing on the value, okay, and value will always come with the legitimacy. Okay? So focusing only based on power and influence, it can completely shift the direction of the whole program, and it can misalign even though the stakeholders are very powerful influencing, but in the end the program is not going to generate the value it is derived to, because that comes with legitimacy, right? And yeah, so that's how I see it. And vendors,
Absolutely.
suppliers, anyone, right? So there is no hierarchy which is set throughout the program. That's why we say, right, the stakeholder alignment. It is very very dynamic. Okay, so based on the situation we are in and based on the stage we are in, the stakeholder alignment changes. Okay, it's
Absolutely.
not goes with always the someone with more power and influence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Rajiv, let's move on to the next segment. And in this segment, I want to talk about what are the hidden gaps that prevents today's professional moving into larger leadership role. I want to set the tone for this particular segment before I seek your experiences and your opinion about it. Today, Rajiv, I see I'm very active on LinkedIn and many other channel, communication channel, even WhatsApp, and I or Reddit. So what I have seen, today there are a lot of people. I have seen that they every single day they are posting some new learning course they have completed, or some new certification that they have completed, or maybe some new MBA course that they have enrolled for. But in spite of having 60 certification, 70 certification, so many MBA courses, so many LinkedIn learning, active on Reddit and many other this professional platform. But and some of the people when I'm a very curious person, I reach out to some of these professional. I tell them, what's your reason behind doing so many certification? Has this really helped you in your career transformation, career growth? And one answer that I get is no, their career from last 10 years is stagnant. There is have not moved in their leadership role. So, I want to ask you this question. What is this hidden gap that prevents this professional moving into the larger leadership role in spite of doing so many MBA courses, in spite of being doing so many global professional certification, but their career is completely stagnant? What is your experience around that, Rajiv?
Okay, that's a very interesting the question, Kailash. So yeah, so how I see this, okay, that is happening. It may be again means I can relate it to. I'll bring it back to again the program management and what PMI says in PGMP. So focusing on the value, and that is something you also mentioned in the sessions when we were learning about PGMP. That it's don't only focus on a course, okay, the content of course or achieving a certification, okay, it means nothing if we are not implementing it, okay. So it's the same thing about because a degree, a certification, a course, okay, it is going to provide the output. The output can be a learning, okay, a certification, maybe a badge, okay, which you can post on LinkedIn, but the real thing is the outcome which is going to derive the value, and outcome in this scenario will come from implementation. If you're not putting that learning into implementation and generating value for either you're working for your startup or working for any other organization, right? If you are not generating value from that, then it has no meaning. Okay, so it's very very important. So in if we say that in this way, right? If we relate it to the terms we use for project or program management, if you are building something which is not being operationalized, okay, without something operationalizing something, it is not going to generate any value. Okay, something you built and it is just lying somewhere, it is lying in your head if it is in form of learning, and you are not implementing, and then if you are switching to next course, okay, so it's too much of output but not generating any outcome. So unless you
Agree.
start, take some time, implement it. And that's what I think you have mentioned in one of your session, that you don't want people to just learn and pass the exam. If that's the purpose, means it it is not going to generate some value. And you took this as an example for explaining the output versus outcome, I remember, right? So this is something I see. If that is
Yeah,
happening in this scenario, it it is definitely, if you are not putting something into generating a value, then it is not going to have the impact.
absolutely. I think these are the wonderful gap that are preventing today's leader from moving into the leadership role. They are just doing certification. They are not applying the program management principles. They are not applying the domain activity concurrently. Okay, because all the domain activity have to be applied concurrently in every single stage of the program life cycle. And until the global professional do not realize this, none of the certification will transform their career or will give them a career growth. I have few other point that I have experienced. Now, if you don't mind, I want to share that some of the gap which I have also seen, because so many individuals who PGMP certified today, some of the gap that I see is influence gap. If I explain this influence gap is, that means they want to influence from their authority rather than from their experience and by their power skills, by their business acumen, or even by their way of working. So, somebody, because he has the authority and power as a program manager, they only want to influence the stakeholder based on their power, not based on their power skills. So, power is different than power skills. Power skills is empathy. Power skills is human intelligence, not artificial intelligence. Power skills is active listening. Power skills is continuously communicating. And this is what the influence gap that is not growing this today's leader career, though they are growing their certification. They're doing 20 certification, 30 certification, but their career remains the same. So influence gap, the leaders should understand that they should try to influence the stakeholder not through their power, but through their power skills. And if they don't know what are the various skills of this power skills talent triangle, then they should go and download that talent triangle from the PMI website and focus on each of these skills under this power skill angle of the PMI talent triangle. So that's one gap I see. Also, Rajiv, another gap is business acumen gap. Business acumen is the second angle of the PMI talent triangle. See, Rajiv, you know what I have also experienced, that the professional today, sometimes I see even the program manager professional, they say that we have 10 years of program management experience, but they say that they have never created the business case. How can you be a program manager if you have never created or never participated in developing the business case? Because the business case justify the business need. The business case justify the benefit that the program going to deliver. The business case justifying the risk tolerance, that how much risk we can tolerate in anticipation of the benefit that we planning to realize, or the business case justify the resources. And another worst thing is They think that business case is a static document. So business case will change in every stage of the program life cycle if the business environment in which the program is operating. So this is another gap that I have experienced, Rajiv, business acumen gap. They don't have the business acumen. They are still very, very technical lens. They know way of working. They know agile. They know Kanban. They know CI/CD, the continuous integration, continuous development. They know the DevOps, but they don't know the business acumen. And that is what the PGMP will build. And the strategic alignment domain will focus, majority of the task will focus on the business acumen gap. So this is the reason many professional leadership career is not changing in spite of doing certification, because they are memorizing some concept, some ECO task, and by even memorizing some mock questions, they are getting certified. But intent is completely wrong. One more gap that I see personally, Rajiv, if you allow me to talk more on this aspect, is relationship capital gap. And if I correlate this with the previous question, again, the many global professional who are PGMP certified today, they got need improvement or below target, that they have a gap in relationship capital. In fact, even in the portfolio management, we talk about one of the resources, intellectual capital. Intellectual capital is non-tangible resource. And in that intellectual capital, see, human capital is very important. I don't deny human capital importance. And I also don't deny importance of, the financial capital. Also, the financial capital is also very, very important for program success. But what about intellectual capital, which is the relationship with the stakeholder? So nobody building that relationship. So there's the relationship capital gap that I see. And this is purely because of lack of principally being correct. Today's professional do not have core principle in their practices. They know some activities, but because they are principally weak, they are not taking this activity the way they have to be structured, the way they have to be performed. And if I tell you, Rajiv, there are many other gaps that I have seen in a professional. If we keep talking about, probably this podcast will grow for many, many hours. Every, uh, person who is listening to this, they must understand that certification will not grow their career. The application of program management principles, the application of the domain activity, right time at the right stage of the program lifecycle, that will transform their career. I hope you agree with me on that, Rajiv, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah,
So
that is
let's,
something. Yeah,
yeah, go
and
ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, and when you mention about the the building the relationship, right? That and if I connect it back to the legitimacy we are talking about in stakeholder alignment. So when we are doing stakeholder alignment, we are also stakeholders for others, right? So having legitimacy in all the discussions, okay, and not only having the showing the power and urgency, okay, that's what is going to build that relationship, because it builds your rapport with someone when we are interacting with real people, right? We are talking about the human intelligence. So that is it comes with the connect, where okay, what we are expressing first is our communication should needs to be very, very strong. And when we say strong, it must be clear, because that's the purpose of communication, whatever we are trying to convey. And whatever we are so communicating, it has to be very, very legit. Okay. So
Absolutely.
legitimacy derives the influence. Okay.
Clarity.
So yeah, the that's if we focus on legitimacy rather than only urgency. Obviously, if something is urgent, the urgency needs to be shown. But along with legitimacy, it changes the equation when we are communicating with someone.
Absolutely. Let me ask maybe similar. question slightly different way. Okay. See, you are a PGMP certified today. I want to ask you, other than certification, what does PGMP changed in your professional mindset, Rajiv?
Yeah, so definitely means exam is just a milestone, right? Where you, let's say, you get certified, and you also get the confidence that whatever the content from PMI you are going through, you have read it to the level where PMI says, okay, yeah, you understand it in a certain way, but it has a larger impact. Okay, PMI's purpose for any certification, not just PGMP, is not just to certify people and stamp their experience. Okay, it's about how you understand the complete the the bigger picture. Okay, as we started with the discussion on, okay, what is expected from professionals. Okay, so looking at the bigger picture, that's something means it's not that I was not doing it earlier, but I know it's not something I was not doing something exceptional. It is expected from everyone having bigger picture. Okay. And as you rightly said, the business acumen. Okay. And if you are not involved in creation of business case, which is true for, and PMI also says, for in some scenarios, you may program manager may not be the one who will create the business case. If maybe business case is already existing. Okay. But program manager must be thorough with the business case, because that's where the journey starts. Okay. And
Absolutely.
if you are not following that, we are missing the alignment from step one. Okay. And keeping that business case updated, because it's not a static document. So only that much. Okay, it takes care of everything, because as you mentioned, right, you don't do, there are, from all the domains, you don't do one domain at a time, right? You do all when you're in a real program. So if you look at just business case, keeping business case up to date will take care of all the domains, because you cannot update a business case without having stakeholder alignment, without collaborating with everyone. Okay, so this is something very very important. So, and I'll
Absolutely.
go
I
back to
agree.
the first section of the podcast, right, where we discussed about strategic thinking and the business. Okay, so business acumen is very very important. So that is something I have realized that PMI emphasize too much on, and the core of program is to generate value. Okay,
Absolutely.
and that can only come when whatever we are building in a program, okay, in any domain, when it is aligned with the business acumen, and obviously the business case needs to be aligned with the organization's objective or
Absolutely.
the strategy.
Awesome. Awesome. Rajiv, for the PGMP community or the program management community, I want you to walk us through your journey, because every certification has a story behind it. Okay. And of course, you may also have some story. And even during this journey, there may be many time a thought may have come that, I will postpone it, I will do it next time. Or maybe there have been challenges, personal challenges, professional challenges. There are times where certain domain activities may not make really sense, because the way you have managed program in your past so many organization, they were completely different than what you are doing. And you may sometime may have also lost a trust that is this certification will really make value. So there may be these different things that may be there. So I would, for this larger community, I want you to walk us through your PGMP certification journey and how you remained motivated and achieved the success at the end of it.
Sure. So, Kailash, I would first start with saying, whenever majority of people, when the term PMI comes in discussion, okay, people think of PMP. Okay, so my journey also started with that. Okay, then instead of doing PMP, means as I found okay, people who have done certifications in past. Okay, and I first chose the right certification. So to tell the, yeah, you and everyone who is listening to the podcast, I'm not PMC certified. Okay, and when
Okay.
I, yeah, when I took help from my mentors, okay, they they said, means you go through the PMP content. Okay, if you feel something which is yeah, that then you will understand whether this is something you want to do, or you, then if not, you check the PGMP content. Okay, so I have gone through the PMBOK, all the content, and it felt like whatever I have done through experience, that learning is already there. I was confident about that. Okay, so that's how the journey started, means in selection of that. And I also checked the criteria that PMP is not a mandatory check for applying for PGMP.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, and the journey was it's not very quick that you decide and you prepare and immediately you sit for the exam, because it requires a lot of focused attention, right? And so too much of time investment is needed. Okay, and that was there. So it was a journey for few months. Okay, and obviously I took roughly 1.5 month where it was I was very much focused on studying the material. And when I was preparing for exam, one thing
Yes,
in exam which I noticed, and in the main exam or in the mock exams also, the way you manage program or the project management experience you carry is is different at many places.
yes,
The way the way PMI suggests and the way you are doing. Okay, and that is totally based on, because there cannot be a blueprint for any project or program management. So it has to be, always has to be tailored. Okay,
yes,
but
I agree.
but what I focused on, okay, obviously to pass the exam we have to choose the answers based on what's the PMI standard is. But in real life that may not be the right answer when you're actually executing your project or program. Okay, so why that difference is, the key thing which I noticed, I started understanding the difference. Okay, why PMI is saying this is the best choice. Okay, and why the other choice, which is applicable maybe in my scenario, in my program, okay, is the best choice. Okay, so that's how in those thoughts, okay, you start relating to, okay, how, why something is very specific to the industry I am working on. Okay, why it is very specific to the company organization, the way my organization work, or the way my organization suggests to engage with stakeholders. So there are different setups. Okay, so in the end it does not make, and PMI is it's a standard, or let's say guidelines. It's not a mandate that any program project needs to be run
Right.
in a certain way, right? But then you start realizing there is best is something which will always come from your thought process. Okay, and the fun part for PGMP exam, right? They'll always be out of four. There'll be two options, right? Which you can completely think, okay, they are not correct, but there will be always fight between in your mind. There'll always be fight between the those best two answers. Okay, so maybe you'll always, so it's always a struggle between how you are doing it and how PMI suggests to do it.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
and obviously for exam, the what PMI suggests, so it's always thing. And PMI is, as I said, PMI is not asking you to change the way you are working, but to improve. Okay, and
sure.
to improve you need to understand what you are doing, why you are. If you are not able to understand the why part of it, maybe we need to explore, and that's something you can start implementing in different way. So yeah, the journey was yeah, around 6 months or a little bit long, but with a focused attention of more than a month when I was preparing for final exam, because taking mock exam is also a 4 hours of commitment. Okay, just for the exam, and then mock exam is something you have to analyze the result and score as well, right? So it takes a lot of time. Then you have to go back to again study and check the concept where you are not understanding the concept thoroughly. So it requires time. So it's a journey which takes a little bit. People who have done PMP will understand yeah, the cycle is same, but PGMP is what I have realized through interaction with people who have done PMP. Okay, PGMP questions are very scenario based. Okay, so they'll not be very calculated answer to it. It will come with your experience and then the knowledge you gain from the PGMP standard. Okay, and it's always going to be a fight between how I do it and how PMI suggests to do it. Okay, in some cases it's going to be a match also. Okay.
Absolutely. I agree. And I want to add my thought around this also, Rajiv, that You rightly said the way we do work in our organization, but the way PMI recommend is different because see, PMI standards are global standards, and these standards are written from many years of research, interviews, and even in the exam there are some evaluation question, pre-test question. PMI, through that pre-test and evaluation question, they try to see how different people are responding, and after that the question become the real exam question and all. So PMI mindset is very, very important for PGMP certification journey. Of course, the way you have worked in last so many organizations, we are not saying that they are not the best practices. Maybe in your environment they may have worked, but there are better way of working. PMI standards telling you the best practices that are being consistently followed all over the world to deliver the strategic program outcome. So you rightly said probably PMI standards will give us some different approach to do our work, and we can adapt them, and then we can compare with what we were doing in the past, then what we are doing today, and then see the result, and then we can see what is better for our organizational program context. So I think so this is very good point that you have touched upon. This is the last segment, Rajiv, where quickly I want to ask you. So there are so many professionals who are aspiring for PGMP certification. Can you share some important lesson learned or some advice for this global PGMP aspirants, Rajiv?
Yes, so first thing is to be confident, okay, that PGMP, especially when you start searching for content. So first thing to identify, as I said, right, whether PGMP is the right certification for you.
Right.
Okay. Then finding a mentor will be helpful because unlike other certification, right, PGMP, you will not find too much content which is available or the internet or YouTube. Because if we
Yes.
look at any other certification, if we compare with PMP, you'll find too much to get to know what the certification is about. Because PGMP it may be because we have a smaller community who's PGMP certified, right? And
Yeah.
so that's why the content availability follows the same ratio. So find a mentor, okay, in first selecting the right certification if you're thinking of PGMP, and yeah, and read through the program management standard, okay, and find a mentor who can
Yes.
help, okay, someone like you, Kailash, okay, who have experience of training like I think thousands of people, and there are many who are PGMP certified successfully, right? And I can say that confidently because we are connected in that WhatsApp learning group, right? Where almost every month or every second month someone is getting certified in PGMP. So someone like you, okay. So find that, attend the training because going through the PGMP standard by yourself, it can be a tedious task, not impossible, but something which is time consuming to start with. Okay, so
Yes.
still, yeah. So going through the sessions, which that will build the foundation, and that will bring more clarity. Okay, because learning from someone's experience is always good, right? So having a mentor from beginning is always helpful. So I would recommend that, and start the preparation. So because whenever we are starting, it's going to be a journey for a few months, right? It's going to be, some people have completed this in 2 or 3 months also, okay, but in general I think it's going to take a little more than that for, yeah, for around 6 months if you are continuously chasing it. And sometimes even if you have to prioritize something else over it, because we know the PGMP is going to be the preference for working professionals, okay, and the work and the personal things may come up. So even if it is coming, don't discard it from your plan, right? Just, yeah, just move it little bit, and take the mentor's help on how to approach. And mock exams are
Absolutely.
very crucial, which builds your confidence, okay. So yeah, having access to the content, something similar to what Addon skills provide, right? And yeah, that reminds me, some of the mock exam questions are somewhat similar, okay. So it's not something which is out of the world, okay. It's aligning your experience with PMI standard as we were discussing, right? So it's not something very very heavy, which we cannot get through. Because I also, as I said, right, 6 months of journey. So at few times I also had to lower the priority for the exam. Sometimes I felt, okay, shall I schedule the exam now or later? But those things happen. Okay,
Yeah.
we all know. So, and like any program or project, the priorities will change. So I'd say first thing is find a mentor, start the journey, and then you'll start having clarity. Yeah.
Absolutely agree, Rajiv. I'll tell you, just a day before yesterday, I was talking to somebody. He failed PGMP once, and when I recommended him that go through a structured course, find a mentor, he reached out to me. But he said, no, no, I will make one more attempt, and if I'm not able to do in the second attempt, probably then I will do it. And just a couple of days back, he again failed the second attempt as well. So what is happening, because of lack of mentorship, you will only make many attempts, because you rightly said in program management domain, there is not too much good content available, like for project management domain content. So mentor who have experience of helping so many global professionals will certainly help them to, get the result faster, and not just getting certified, but by really applying these standards into their ongoing professional world. So that is very important. The role of mentorship is very important. Otherwise, you will only make repeated attempt, waste your time, waste your money, and ultimately then you will realize that there is no other solution. And of course, the mock exam, a quality mock exam is very important than quantity of too many exam. So, if you do not have the exam which are aligned to the PMI question, maybe every question has a structure, has a pattern. Every question should be mapped to particular domain, particular ECO task, particular stage of the program life cycle, particular role and responsibility of a program stakeholder. So there are structure in which PGMP questions are written, and who have experience of writing such question can, then those questions will help you to pass. Otherwise, the mock exam, if you do find some cheaper option from some of those online sites, are not going to help again to clear the certification exam. And that is where add-on skills, Rajiv, as we said, thousands of people we have trained and we have certified, and they have given feedback. Kailash, these questions are so wonderful that even before getting certified, that we are experiencing the growth mindset. We are experiencing the value that we can realize from our program initiative. And there are hundreds of such testimonial that we have received because of our mock exam, even before they got certified. Of course, once they got certified, they have shared great input. Rightly said, Rajiv, those mock exam, those mentorship play vital role in PGMP certification journey. So, Rajiv, I think so. We are at the end of this podcast. Thank you. We are almost close to 1.5 hours, and I'm sorry I took a bit longer time of yours, but it was very interesting conversation. And frankly saying, I have so many more questions that in mind, but we both have other priorities and constraints of time. Every good conversation have to end at certain place. So, that's what we will end this podcast today. And I want to personally thank you, Rajiv, for taking this time out and sharing your wonderful experiences of program management more than just a certification journey. So, thank you once again, Rajiv, for this conversation with me.
Thank you, Kailash, and thank you for having me. It was a nice conversation, as you said. Means, yeah, if we talk about it, it is gonna take hours. But yeah, it's a wonderful conversation, and looking forward to interact with you in, yeah, in different ways we are connected, right? Okay,
Absolutely,
so
Rajiv.
thank you.
Thank you again. And this is to my community, P3M community. Trust me, this podcast, if you really think it from the learning mindset, then there is so much to learn from this conversation, so much pointers that you can take back and implement in your practices. And Rajiv has shared last 19 years of his experiences of handling strategic programs. So please watch this podcast till the end and get the maximum value out of it. And if you like this conversation, then do not stop the learning. Please share this episode with the community in your network, because when you share value, you get value. And if you stop sharing value, you stop getting value in your own life. So do share, even comment your feedback and subscribe, because we're going to have lot of such wonderful guests like Rajiv, and there are so many wonderful conversations that we already have done in our earlier podcast. And I'm sure that coming podcast going to be very similar in terms of the value realization. So that's all for now. Thank you to each one of you for being part of this P3M with Kailash Upadhyay community. Signing off for today. Thank you once again, Rajiv. Thank you very much for being here with me.
Thank you, Kailash.